Hello guys, Alan here and welcome back to the channel, and this is part 2 of our site design series inside of the Revit software, and we are going to continue from wherever we left off in part 1. But before we get started into what we have to do in today's video, if you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, because you do not want to miss out on the tutorials and the master classes that I'll be dropping here on YouTube for your consumption. All right, so please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel and like this video as well. All right, and you can drop a comment in the comment section if you want to add to whatever we are going to be talking about in today's video, or you probably want to just say something. All right, you can just drop that in the comment section and I'll do well to respond to each and every one of you guys. All right, so in today's video we are going to be talking about, we are going to be dealing with topographies inside of the Revit software, but this time we are going to look at how we can export a topography from Auto Cad all the way into Revit without losing that topo surface. All right, so we are going to see how we can export all of those AutoCAD files, which are those topographies in AutoCAD or site layouts, into Revit without losing the topography layout. And also we are going to be looking at one very interesting thing, which is called the point files. All right, so this this lesson is going to be interesting. I'd like you guys to stay tuned and make sure you watch every single thing to the end of this video. Right, do not be, like I always say in every single video of mine, do not be quick to ask questions. All right, just make sure you watch everything, and by the time you are able to watch everything, your question might be answered. All right, so let's just take our time and let's go through everything together. I love you guys and I'm going to teach you guys every single thing in here, just as I learned from my mentor, Balkan Architect. All right, so we are going to get started, and this time we are going to import the topography from AutoCAD all the way into Revit, and we are going to also look at what we call the point files. All right, which are also going to be given to us by the surveyor. All right, so now those point files can either be in AutoCAD. So if they're in AutoCAD, you have to find a way to import that into Revit to get that surface, and for you to be able to start your project on, or you'll be able to design your building on that. All right, so we are going to get started now, and I'm currently in my side view. Like I said in the previous part, which is the part 1 or the beginning of this series, when it comes to topo surface, anytime you are in any of the floor plan views, all right, let's say the level 1 floor plan view, the level 2 floor plan view, or let's say even if you had level 3 or level 4, all right, the topography is not going to be visible, or your topo surface is not going to be visible in any of those views. Topo surface in Revit are only visible in the site plan view and in the elevation views, and also in the 3D view. All right, so they are only visible in these 3 type of functional view templates. They are only visible in the site plan view, and also the 3D view, and also in the elevation views. All right, you can actually make them visible in the floor plan views, but you would have to go into your visibility graphics to turn that on. And when you turn that on, your cut plane is also going to cut that topo surface. So I demonstrated that in the part 1 of this series, so you can go back and watch the part 1 if you haven't watched the part 1 to understand what I'm talking about. So we are going to get started, and first of all, I have a topo surface inside of AutoCAD, which I got from the internet, and I'm going to open that up here for you guys to see that. So I'm going to bring out my AutoCAD, and we have this topo surface you can see in here, and when I zoom all the way in, you can see in here we have 870 in there, and we have 865, which shows all the various points at which this topo surface goes up and beneath on the surface. All right, so you can see the various projections in there. We have 068, so this place, it tends to be much deeper, and this place comes up and this place goes down. Now you understand all of this in there. All right, so this is the topo surface I got from the internet, and I opened this up in AutoCAD, and I'm going to demonstrate how we can bring this into Revit and model exactly what we are seeing here. All right, so now there's one very interesting thing, guys, you do not pay attention to, is this this thing you see right here. All right, so we have this in here showing our y-axis and also in our x-axis in here. Now I remember way back in school when we were studying graphs and all of those stuff, we have the y-axis and also the x-axis, and we have the point origin at 0. All right, the point origin, which is the 0 where all those lines cross at each other. All right, so we have this y coordinates and we have the x coordinates in here. All right, now there is an invisible coordinate which you guys do not see here, which is the z or the z coordinate. All right, so we have a z coordinate which tends to act like the 3D view inside of the AutoCAD software. All right, so I'm going to try and pan around a little bit where we can actually see this topo surface in the 3D view. All right, so I'm going to hold down my shift key and hold down the scroll button on my mouse, and then I'm going to zoom this out so you guys see what I'm talking about. Now you notice in here we trying to act like we are in the Revit software. All right, so you notice in here we have this point in here. Now I'm not going to do anything to this point so that you guys can see what is going to happen in Revit. All right, but then okay, I can let me just try and let me just do away with this point. All right, let me do away with this point and let's just leave this as it is. All right, so now you notice this this topo surface tends to act like a 3D view inside of Revit. All right, so now when you come in here, you notice we now have a z coordinate. All right, initially we had just the y coordinate and the x coordinates in there, but right now we have the z coordinate, which is in here serving as the projection or our 3D view inside of the Revit software. So if I should just hit on this cube to show the front in there, you notice all of these things to go up in there all the way in all of those points in there. All right, so this tends to act like now a 3D topo surface in there, and we are now going to import this into Revit, exactly what we see here. So maybe if you're working on a project and you are being given this topo surface in AutoCAD by the surveyor and you want to bring that into Revit, I'm going to show you guys how you can actually accomplish that in Revit. All right, so we have this in here which is serving as a 3D view. So we have this beautiful topo surface in there. Now one thing we can actually do is we can actually get the coordinates at which all of these heights actually move in there. All right, so I'm going to select any of those contour lines in there, and I'm going to type on the list on. Now just make sure you hit on list on your keyboard and just enter that in there. Okay, let me just get out of there and just select it back, and let's just make sure select this and L. All right, I think I know why. Let's just get back into the front and select this and LIS and list that in there, and perfect. All right, so now you notice in here we have the x coordinates, the y coordinates, and the z coordinates. Now all of these coordinates change when I select any of those different contour lines. All right, so with the list, in the list command inside of AutoCAD is going to be able to show me all of those projections. All right, so now you notice we just selected one and we had 21 to 21,336 in there. All right, so I'm going to escape out of there and let me just select this in here, and then let me just hit on list on my keyboard and come in here. Now you remember the initial one, we had 21 and 36,000 in there. All right, now we have 22,860 in there. So these z coordinates tend to change anytime I select a different contour line in there. That is because you know the contour lines are not straight, they are both it comes in different forms, wavy and all of that stuff in there. So we have this simple beautiful contour line and we're going to export this into Revit. Now you notice in here we have some numbers in here. All right, we have these figures in here, but the first thing you'd want to do is you'd want to check your units. You'd want to know if it's in millimeters or in meters. Now with this I know it's in millimeters. All right, so I'm going to change this to meters. All right, or I can still leave it at millimeters or meters, anyone anyone that works for you. So I'm going to do with millimeters because I like working in millimeters often. I usually use that a lot. So I'm going to leave this at millimeters in there, hit on apply and hit on OK. So I know I'm working in millimeters. All right, so okay, this is perfect. So now we are going to import this into Revit and we are going to start working with this. But before we do any of that, I'd want you guys to pay attention to something. So I'm going to select this contour line, and when I make sure you're in the home tab, and then you head straight into this layers tab in there. Right now you notice the contour line I selected is with this C principale in there. All right, this in there, the C principals in there. All right, so this is the layer that forms the contour line. It's very, very important that you know that. All right, so I know my contour lines are on this layer right there. All right, so perfect. All right, so now we are going to get into the Revit software and we're going to import this in there. So I'm going to bring out my Revit software, and the first thing you'd want to do is you would want to head straight into the insert tab. When you get into this insert tab, we have the option. I've spoken about bringing AutoCAD files severally into Revit. All right, so we have the option to link a CAD file, which is right here, to link a CAD file, or we have the option to import a CAD file. All right, I'm going to assume most of you guys watching me do not know what that is. All right, so I'm going to take my time to just say something briefly about that. So when you link an AutoCAD file into Revit, it means that you would still have the option to be able to make changes. All right, you still have that option to be able to make changes to that AutoCAD file, and it's also going to affect what is happening inside of the Revit software. So if I make changes in AutoCAD, it's also going to make those same changes in the Revit software. That is why I'm going to link a CAD file. All right, so but then if I import a CAD file, it means that that is it. I do not have the chance or the opportunity to be able to change something in Revit, and it's also going to change in AutoCAD. All right, so that is just the difference in there. So if I import, it means that it's exactly what it is. So I'm going to import that AutoCAD file, but you guys can try and link the CAD file if you want, but I'm going to import this AutoCAD file in there. So I'm going to select my import, and I'm going to make sure I find my AutoCAD file in there. So I saved that on desktop. I saved that on my desktop in a folder called Topo. So I'm going to go in there, and I have this in here. All right, so I'm going to select that site in there, and when you come right below in here, we have the current view only. So if you check this in there, it means that with the site view I'm going to import, or this topo surface I'm going to import into Revit, is only going to appear in this current view only. It's not going to appear in any of those subsequent views, and so I do want it to appear in all of those views. So I'm going to leave this unchecked, and of course it's a DWG file. Just an AutoCAD file is always a DWG file, and with the colors I'm going to leave that at preserve with the layers all, and with the import units, Revit has that ability to be able to detect whether it's in meters or whether the file you're importing is in meters and in millimeters or in inches or in feet. All right, so but sometimes Revit tends to kind of fall a little bit short. It kind of falls a little bit short in auto detecting that. So since I know the units my AutoCAD file is being saved in, I'm going to navigate all the way in there. All right, but if you do not know what those files has been saved in, you can just leave that at auto detect, and Revit is going to perform that magic in there. So I'm going to select the millimeters because I knew that I saved that file in millimeters. All right, with the positioning, with this I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in subsequent videos in this series. Just as I learned from Background Architect, I'm going to speak a little more about that in there so you guys can understand what is happening in there. And we have a place at level 1, so of course we're going to place that at level 1. We do not have any option orient to view, correct lines that are slightly off axis. Of course we want it to correct lines, and you can hit on open in there, and let's just hold on for Revit to load that in, and this is perfect. All right, so you notice I have my site. I have that site topo surface all the way in here. I'm going to try and move it in here, but it's pinned, it's pinned to that particular surface in there. All right, so I'm going to unpin that, select everything, and then I'm going to move it all the way to this part right here. All right, so I have this in here. All right, so this is perfect, and then I'm going to make sure I pin this in here. So now we have this topo surface which is pinned exactly to this center right here. Okay, so we are going to get started in there, and okay, so we are going to get started, and if I select this, you notice we now have the option in here to explode and query as well, and delete layers. All right, so we are going to start to generate the topo surface to fit to exactly this topo surface we got in AutoCAD online. All right, so you notice we have every single thing in here. All right, so I'm going to get started, and what you have to do is you have to navigate to your massing and site. Just get to the massing and site in there. We are going to be talking about everything in here from the property line. I think I made a separate video talking about property lines in there, so in this series I'm not going to be talking about the property line, so you guys can make sure you study that as well in there. All right, so just make sure you get to that video I did on site design, and you can actually get to know what this property line works. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this in this video. I'm not going to go too deep into that, and we are going to generate, so let's get into what we have to do. So we are going to generate this topo surface exactly as what we got in AutoCAD. All right, so we are going to get started, and what we want to do is we would want to click on topo surface in there. And when you click on topo surface, we have the option to place points. So we've already spoken about this, where we talked about placing points in there, where we now used that to actually create a simple topography inside of the Revit software. But now we are not going to use this. All right, so we are going to use this right here, which is the create from import. So if I should click right in there, we have select import instances, and then we have the select point files in there. All right, so I'm going to select import instances, and I'm going to show you guys how we can also do with the select point file. All right, so select import instances means that I've imported that into Revit, so I'm going to select that, and when I select that in there, you notice we have this pop-up menu which says add points from selected layers. So we need to make sure with all of these contour lines we see in here in that pale brown color, all of those contour lines we see in here, we want Revit to register with all of those contour lines in there. So we need to make sure we find the exact layer which is this contour line. Now you remember before I came into Revit, I went into the layers in AutoCAD. All right, so let me get back in here, and when we brought that in here, we noticed this right here was our contour line layer. All right, so that's the layer for all of this stuff, all of these lines showing the contour lines in there. All right, this layer right here. All right, so I'm going to escape out of there, and I'm going to go back into Revit. All right, so which is this layer right here. So I want Revit to register that as the layer I want it to follow to create those topo surface inside of Revit. All right, so I'll make sure I uncheck everything and check only this inside of the Revit software. But let's cancel out of this in case you do not know how to check for the layer, in case you don't know the layer at which these contour lines are being drawn in, and you are already in the Revit and you do not have AutoCAD installed in your software, don't worry at all, I got you covered. All right, so I'm going to cancel this out of the way, and I'm going to cancel this out of the way. So now let's assume we didn't know that the C principal was the layer at which this contour lines was being drawn in. All right, and I want to find out inside of the Revit software. It's very simple. All right, so I learned this from Balkan Architect. So what you have to do is you just need to make sure you click on it, and then you head straight into this query in there, and we click on that, and you now make sure you select that in there, and it's going to tell you the layer at which this is being drawn in. So I'm going to select any of those lines, so I'm going to click on this, and you notice in there with the layer level we have the C principal in there. I don't know how that is being pronounced, but I'm pronouncing that as the C principal. All right, Someone can translate that in the comment section so we learn from that as well. All right, so this is C principal. I'm going to call that C principal. So we have this as the layer. All right, so do not forget that. So we are okay with that, and we now can escape out of here, and we need to go back to our massing and site, topo surface, and get into create from import, select import instance, and we are going to select this, and we know that that layer is this right here. So we are going to check none, and we are only going to check the C principal in there, and we want Revit to draw that with this. All right, so you're going to click on OK in there, and this is perfect. So now it says the layers you have selected contain both contour lines and non-contour lines of non-constant. You may want to go back to select fewer layers, or you can continue, but the boundary of the site may be larger than you want. All right, so I think we are fine with this. I'm fine with that. Let me head into the 3D view, and let's see what Revit has generated for us. So this is what Revit has generated for us in here. All right, so we have this in here. Now you remember we had one point in here which I deleted in AutoCAD, but because I didn't save the file, it's also going to work like that. So we can actually delete this point. All right, we can select it, and then we can delete this point out of there, so we do not have that straight line in there. You see that line in there. So Revit tends to create absolutely everything with the file that you generate in there. So we are going to finish this, and perfect. So now we have our topo surface created inside of the Revit software, and we can just hide our AutoCAD file, and we have this in here. All right, so this is the topo surface we got from the AutoCAD, and we brought that into Revit, and we used that to generate this surface inside of the Revit software. Right, this is very, very nice. I think if I should change the view, let me just add some shadows in there, and I think if I should change this to shaded, and you notice we have this topo surface in there, which is perfect, which we generated from an AutoCAD software. All right, so this is perfect. We have this in here. All right, so this is how you can generate this into Revit, and this is the simplest way I can teach you guys on how you can actually achieve that in there. Now we are going to move on to the next thing we want to talk about, which is the point files. All right, sometimes you're going to be given some point files from a surveyor, and you want to import that data into Revit, and when you import that data into Revit, it's going to be able to generate this topo surface you see in here. All right, so I think I got a sample CSV point files online, and I'm going to show you guys how you can actually also do that inside of the Revit software. I'm sure most of you guys do not have any idea about this. All right, so make sure you just stay tuned, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to leave this topo surface right here. I'm going to make sure I unhide that imported file in there. So I'm going to select this, unhide that, and then toggle review hidden, and bring back that AutoCAD. I'm bringing back that AutoCAD file in there. Right, so this is perfect. We have this in there, and we are going to talk a little more about this getting to the end of this video. Right, so I'm going to end here, and we are going to talk next about the point file. So we are going to move on to the point files, on how we can actually generate our point files inside of the Revit software. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, on how we can generate those CSV files in there. Right, so if you have a CSV file and you want to import that into Revit to generate your topo surface, it's quite very simple. Revit has all the mechanisms in place for you to be able to achieve that. All right, so you need to also make sure you navigate to your massing and site. Just click on topo surface in there, and we head straight into the create by import. Click on that, and you notice in there we have the specify point file in there. All right, so I've spoken about the select import instances. So this is only going to work. The select import instances is for you importing something from AutoCAD or probably any software into Revit, and you want Revit to use that to generate that topo surface for you. All right, so but with this time we are going to work with a point file. All right, so I'm going to get into specify point files, and I'm going to click on that specify point file in there, and I kept that specified point file inside of my topo surface folder on my desktop. And you notice in here the file type is a CSV file type, which stands for comma separated values. All right, so it's just like a spreadsheet or a table where the comma separates all of those records in there, and it generates everything you need inside of that file. All right, it's just a spreadsheet for tracking and placing all those records and all of those files in there. I'm going to show you guys how you can actually do that inside of AutoCAD and then bring it into the Revit software. All right, so sometimes you are not going to have a CSV file. What you're going to have is going to be like a Word file, let's say Microsoft Notepad, and you're going to have all of those comma separated values, the point files or the points with those commas separating all of those values inside of a notepad, and it's not going to be a CSV file. So don't worry if it's not a CSV file. Just make sure you click on the button right here, and then you make sure you select the comma delimited text in there. All right, so when you select that, you notice I can't see that CSV file in there. It's only going to show the ones with the notepad, all right, with the Microsoft Notepad in there, if you have saved that in Microsoft Notepad. So we are going to click on that, and we are going to change this to a CSV file. So Revit is automatically going to record that it needs a CSV file. All right, so we are going to generate that topo surface. So we are going to generate the topo surface with these CSV files. I think I got all of these files online. I just got that from the internet to demonstrate that for this tutorial. I'm going to change this to list and have all of this in there. So I'll demonstrate with absolutely all of them. All right, so I'm first of all going to start with the contour points grid. All right, so let me just start with this one. Okay, let me start with the contour point. So I'm going to click on this one, and we are going to open that in here, and with 1 unit in the file equals 1 meters. All right, so you can change that if you want, and I'm going to leave that at meters, and I'm going to click on OK in there. All right, and some arrows from file could not be used, so we do not care about that. Let's just escape out of there. And this is what I tend to have with that comma delimited files in there. All right, so this file actually gave me this when I tried it inside of the Revit software. So I'm going to cancel out of there, and I'm going to quit this. I do not want this file, so I'm going to try the other one, and still go to topo surface, get into create by import, and specify point files, and let's try this one out. All right, so we are going to click on OK, and we're going to open that in meters, and I think this is fine. Let me just cancel that and cancel this, get back into topo surface, and I'm going to change the units into millimeters. And if it still gives me that weird shape in there, then it means that my point file is actually way beyond. All right, it wasn't designed properly. I got this online, and I do not have a sample file to actually show you guys, but we are going to find a way where we can actually generate a points file from AutoCAD, and then we bring it into the Revit software. All right, so let me just click on this, and let me change this to millimeters. Let me see what's going to give me, and it's not going to give me anything. So that means that my points in there are way too small. They were way too small. I need to bring them in meters to actually see that point file. It's way too small in there. So that is how you can import point files into Revit. So I'm going to cancel this, by the way, and I'm going to go into AutoCAD and try and generate a points file for this topo surface we see in here, and then I'll import that into Revit, and let's see if we are going to get exactly the same topo surface in there. Right, so I'm going to get straight into AutoCAD, since all of those CSV files I got online are not working. They are all giving me just wrong topo surface. So I'm going to use this same topo surface I have in here to generate a point file and put that in AutoCAD, and we are going to use that in there. All right, so like I said initially, when I navigate in here, you're going to notice we have the Z coordinates in there, and if I should select any of them and just type on list on my keyboard, You notice with my Z values, I have all of those X coordinates, Y coordinates, and the Z coordinates in there. Now, in some instances, you're going to be giving the topo surface in there, but you're not going to have it showing in the 3D form of the various heights. All right, sometimes you're going to see it very flat. It's going to be a straight line, but you're just going to have let's say you're just going to have just points, or maybe this numbers you see in there. All right, these figures you see in here, you're just going to have these figures and just points in there. And when if you navigate that in a 3D view, you're going to notice it's flat. With this file I have, you notice it's not flat. I have some sort of like some topo surface in there. All right, so sometimes you're going to have it flat, and sometimes you're going to have it in the 3D form. All right, do not worry, you can actually do with that. So with this, since I have this showing the Z coordinates, I think I'm fine with this, and we are going to generate that point file and try and import that into Revit and see if it's going to give us exactly the same topo surface we have in here. Right, so we are going to get started, and what we need to do now is we'll need to perform a layer isolation inside of Revit. And the only way I see myself doing that is using these numbers or these figures you see in here. I think for every point you see these figures in there, I think that's where the surveyor will place his instrument, and then we'll record the dimension in there, and then we'll indicate that in there. All right, so I'm going to get started, and you need to perform a layer isolation in there. So what you need to do is we just need to select this figures in there, and okay, so let me just escape out of there. And what you need to do is just click on layer ISO, just do this layer ISO in there, select that, and just get into settings and make sure you turn that off. All right, and make sure you turn this off, and you need to select the object you want to isolate in there. So I'm going to select this and just hit on enter, and you notice we just have all of these numbers in there. All right, we've lost our contour. We haven't lost our contour lines, but we've just isolated to show just this numbers you see in here, because we are going to use this to generate a point file, and then we've sent that into Revit, and we are going to generate that topo surface in there. All right, so we are going to escape out of here. We now need to perform our data extraction, where we can actually create that points file inside of the Revit software in there. All right, so we are going to perform that in there, and I'm going to get started now. And I'm going to get started now. So what you want to do is you want to type data extraction. Let me escape out of there and just type data. Just type data extraction. Just type data extraction on your keyboard and just hit on data extraction in there. And let me just bring this up a little bit. All right, so we want to create a new data extraction. Use previous extraction as template, edit an existing data extraction. So we just want to create a new data extraction in there. So I'm going to select OK in there, and it's going to access where we want to save that CSV file. So I'm going to get into desktop, and I'm going to save this in here, and we're going to call this sample. All right, let's just call this sample in there, and let's change, it's going to be DXE. Fine, so let's just save this in there. And now we have the data source, and including current drawing, select objects in current view. So we'd want to select all of these points we've isolated, the figures in there which we are using as our points in there. So we are going to select that, and we are going to select all of those points in there. Let's just escape out of there, and let me get back in there, and I'm going to select all of these points and just finish that in there. All right, so we've selected all of those points, and we are going to get into next, and in here we have text, display name, non-block, display blocks with attributes, display all objects, and I think we are fine with this. We are going to go to next, and when we head into next, in here we notice in the category filter, so Auto Cad is going to give us the opportunity in telling us all of the stuff we can be able to extract using that point file. All right, so I'm going to make sure I uncheck all of this in there. Now if I did have a flatter surface, in the beginning, I told you some of you are not going to have that showing in AutoCAD in the 3D form. It's just going to be a straight line. I would have added the text to actually represent my Z coordinates, but I already have the Z coordinates in there. So I'm going to just check geometry in there and just check this, and we have those point files in there. Right, so we have all of the point files we need in there. All right, this is the point files we need to actually generate that topo surface in there. And with this, I don't want to show count column, I don't want to show name, I just want this in there. So I'm going to extract this data in there, and we are going to click on next, and we want to insert data extraction into drawing, output data extraction into Excel, and a CSV file. All right, so of course we want it to be a CSV file, so I'm going to select this, and then we click on those three dots, and we are going to save this. Let's just save this in here, and we are going to call this let's call it site, let's call it site Alan in there, site Alan, and we just click on the drop down menu, and then we are going to change this to a CSV file, since I know Revit is automatically going to ask me for a CSV file. Or I can still even use the text template. I told you you can just click on the drop down menu and it's going to give you the delimited text. All right, so we are going to select the CSV file, and you notice we have this useless CSV files in there, which actually are not doing anything. I got this online and they are actually not working. All right, they don't really perform anything in there. So with the file name, we have the file name in there, and it's a .csv file. Okay, this is perfect. So I'm going to save this and click on next and finish. All right, so we are done exporting our points file in there out of AutoCAD. We are done exporting that data in there. So we now have a points file which we are going to use to actually generate the same topo surface we had in here. So I'm going to get back into Revit, and I'm back into Revit. So we now have a point file for this topo surface which we are going to now generate inside of the Revit software. So we are going to get started now. So what we want to do now is we still have to go into our massing and site, and we have to get into topo surface. When we get into topo surface, we are going to click on create from import, but we are going to have a drop down menu where we are going to specify points file. All right, so I'm going to click on that, and we have that points file we generated from AutoCAD in there. We have all that data in there, so I'm going to click on this, and it's a CSV file, so I'm not bothered about that, and I'm going to open this, and of course it's in that file was saved in millimeters, so I do want to change that to millimeters, and just click on OK in there. It says some rows from the file could not be used. Okay, so let's just check that, and let's just finish this, and let's see what we have in there. So let's get into the 3D view, and perfect. So this is what we have for that topo surface in there. All right, so this is what we have for the topo surface in there. So I think we still kind of have the same topo surface we had. Let me just change this to hidden and see what we have. So we've now generated this topo surface in there just as this other topo surface. All right, so this is the points file for the topo surface. I think I know why it's saying some rows cannot be used, because initially we had 1 point going all the way down in there. All right, we had 1 point going all the way down in there. Let me get into any of the elevation views, and this is perfect. All right, so let me get into the 3D view, and we have this topo surface in there, which is exactly as this same topo surface. All right, but we had to generate the points file for this, where we used that point file to actually generate this same topo surface in there inside of Revit, and this is perfect. So we've now been able to understand how we can actually use the points files to actually generate all of those topo surface inside of the Revit software. All right, so this is perfect. We have that in there, and we are going to talk a little bit about some modifications and some other stuff we can do to this topo surface. All right, so this is the point file one. I'm going to delete this out of there, and I'm going to hide this AutoCAD file in there and just leave this topo surface in there. Right, so I just have just this topo surface in there. All right, so now I'm going to select this topo surface and I'm going to get into edit surface. All right, now when we head straight into edit surface, I think let me just navigate to the site view and let me just turn off my triangulation for this for my topographies inside of Revit. So VG on my keyboard and just navigate all the way down and make sure I find topography. All right, just click on the plus sign in there and I'm going to turn this off. So I've turned it off and this is perfect. So now you notice for all of our points in there, it tend to be a lot of points in there. So let's say if I want to make some changes, to this file and just do some changes in there, it's going to be a lot of work. I actually got this knowledge from Balkan Architects. All right, so with this points, if I want to make some very great change inside of the Revit software with this points file, it's actually going to be a lot of work for me to be just navigate with all of these points. Just escape out of there. It's just going to be a lot of work for me to be able to use this to actually create a lot of work in there. All right, it's going to be a lot of work to actually use this in there to when I want to make changes to this topo surface in there. It's going to be a lot of work because I have a lot of points in there and I will not be able to make, let's say, a greater change to the topo surface if needed. All right, but then there's actually a way you can actually simplify these points. All right, how you can simplify these points to Revit, for Revit to actually be able to get all of those points a little bit simplified for you to be able to make changes to your software. All right, how you can actually make changes to everything in here. So now when you notice on this ribbon right here with the modify edit surface, all right, so we want to be able to simplify that so we can make some quite let me say a quite greater change or modification to our topo surface. So you notice in here we have simplify surface. All right, so if I should click on that simplify surface in there, now Revit gives us a pop-up menu where it tells us, it gives us the opportunity to select the accuracy at which we want that topo surface to be at. All right, so we have already an accuracy of 76.2 in there, and I'm going to change this to about 100.5. all right, let me just do 100.5. Click on that and you notice in there our points, some of our points are now gone in there. All right, so now Revit has just simplified that for you to be able to have smaller points, just fewer points in there, so you can actually make changes to it. But if you still are not fine with the accuracy in there, you do not worry, you can still get back into the simplify and let's just change this to probably 300 in there, and let's just hit on OK. And you notice we now have just a fewer points in there, and we can now make just greater changes to our topo surface inside of the Revit software. All right, we can now make greater change in there. Let me just select all of these and I'm going to change all of these to about 400, 333 in there, and you notice it goes all the way up in there. Let me just get back to my default and just select this, Ctrl Z out of there, get into my site and back into the 3D view, escape, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z. All right, so that is how you can actually simplify those points in there, and you can just play around with all of these points and make changes to your topo surface inside of the Revit software. All right, so you can just play around with all of those points in there and just make changes to every single thing you want in here. So I'm going to get back into my site, modify, and just finish this. And make sure you always save your project, guys. Make sure you always save your project in there. So just get into the 3D view, and we have this in here. All right, this is perfect, and we have this in here. So this is also perfect. So now we can just click on this in there, and you notice we have, with the dimensions, we have our projected area, and we have the surface area as well in there. All right, so with this, when it comes to topo surface, you would want to specify your material to it. All right, so if I should get into the edit type in there, and I should just select everything. I just select everything. You notice I select everything. I just have my points in there, just the points. All right, so with the material, we can specify a material to that, and just give it an earth material probably, but sometimes I do want to give it the plant material, just like Barkan Architect does. So Barkan Architect usually uses this one. So I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to use this same point file. Just use render appearance, hit on apply, hit on OK in there. So we specified that in there, and we're going to finish this. So if I should change this to realistic, you're going to notice we are going to have that plant material for our topo surface in there. All right, so this is that plant material Revit gives us. So if I should send this into Enscape, let's just try and see what Enscape is going to give us in here. Let's see what Enscape is going to give us. All right, so let's just see what it's going to do. It's just going to take a minute to load, and all right, so we have the topo surface in here. Let me just navigate all the way and just stand on that topo surface. All right, so you notice in here we have something like it comes off like a wall, so we need to work on our topo surface definitely. So we have this topo surface, which is perfect. So we can create a building pad in there, and we can use this topo surface to actually, so we have a hole in here. How did this hole happen? We still need to work on our topo surface. It needs a lot of work. Okay, this is going to serve like a hill. All right, so this is what Enscape is generating for us, which is quite nice. So I'm going to Enscape out of there. Just cancel that. And someone is going to ask, let's say if I want to create a different part which is not going to have the same material, and I want it to have a different material, which is this topo surface in there. All right, so there's actually a way you can do that. All right, so you can head straight into the massing and site, and you notice in here we can actually split this topo surface. All right, so I can just select the split surface. You can just select that split surface in there, and just select that split surface. Let's get into site and select our split surface, and we can select this in there, and just make sure you select the topo surface in there, and you can just split it. All right, you can just select this line to split that topo surface and escape out of there, and you can finish this. So let's just cancel out of there, and we can just split that in there. All right, so let me just get into the site and just bring our line in here. Let's just put that line in there to split that surface. So let's just finish this, and perfect. So let's head into the 3D view. Now you notice our topo surface is splitted in there. All right, so you can now select this, and then you can put a different material in there if that is what you want to do. So you can just split that, put a different material in there, and specify a new material for this. All right, so you can do that as well, or you can just create a sub region. All right, so after you are done splitting, you can actually merge the surfaces if you want. So you can just select merge and just merge the surfaces back together. All right, so that's also another way as well. So after you are done splitting, you can merge the surface as well. Or what you can do is you can create a sub region in there. All right, so I can just create a separate sub region in there and just select that, and it said a sub region cannot be created outside the boundary of the topo surface. So this is fine. Let's just get into our site. Let's get into our site and escape out of there, select everything, and then move it all the way in here and just get into our 3D view. We are not seeing that, it's right beneath that, and we can finish this. All right, so now we've created a sub region in there. All right, so you can create a different sub region and put a different material to that, and also put a different material to this as well. All right, but then you notice when you select this, it's kind of like selects everything. All right, but then you can select the sub region and then put a different material to that as well in there. All right, so this is how this topo surfaces work inside of Revit. All right, so we are going to end here and we're going to continue in our next part. And I want you guys to make sure you subscribe to my channel, and please do make sure you like this video as well. And if you have anything you want to add, you can add that in the comment section, and I'll do well to respond to each and every single one of you guys. I love you guys. I'll catch you guys in the next part. Peace out. I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.